This is the Development Review Board for Burlington, November 2nd. We are remote and in person. We have some board members who are on Zoom, some members of the public here, and I assume some members of the public remote too, Scott? Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So we take up items as they are on the agenda, and when we call each item, we will either have Scott admit people who are Zoom, or people who are here will come up to the table here. There's a sign-in sheet for people who are actually here in person. And people who are on Zoom, we ask that they provide Scott with a mailing address so they can follow up with them as needed. Communications, as usual, everything is online at this point.
Yep.
So there's no extra communications. And minutes, are there?
Minutes are with the prior packets. Brad, I need to follow up with you for some signatures.
I think.
And the minutes from the last meeting are posted.
Right. So if any members of the board have any comments on it, let me know. Otherwise, I will probably be signing them in the next few days.
Thank you.
Okay. So, go right to the public hearing. The first item is 7787 Pearl Street. This is a request to demolish an existing historic barn and convert it to green space. And I see the applicants here. Is anybody else here who wants to speak on this item? Okay. Ron does. Are there any people remote who are speaking on this one, Scott?
We have one hand raised.
Can they identify themselves? Or bring
Probably Sharon.
Is that on the phone?
Sharon, if you're on the phone with your hand raised.
It's Sharon.
Yep.
Hi, Sharon.
Are you looking to speak on this item, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay.
And the applicant, you are? Okay.
Oh, Brad, we have one more.
Oh, okay.
70618. I don't know who or what that is, but
Okay.
70618 you can speak to.
Okay, so do they don't show up on the screen as people on the phone?
No.
No, okay. So we have two people on the phone, Sharon, and can the other person identify themselves?
Yes, I'm not sure if you can hear me. My name is Matt Bienz.
Okay. So Matt and Sharon and Jacob and Ron, if you would all raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth and whole truth on the pain and penalty of perjury.
I do.
I do.
Okay, so I'd have the applicant present what you want.
So, we're talking about the barn in that picture. I hope you've all gotten to slide through the attached documents I've uploaded to the portal, which is a super slick portal. Huge fan of it now. I did recently add some pictures from 1978, I believe, from when we purchased the property, just to show the state of all the buildings on the property back then. There's a couple, yeah, so October 21st, 1978, so that's when these sets of Polaroids were taken. And I did that partially to show how different the property is now than it was 40 years ago. The buildings were all burned by a fire earlier in 1978, and then my dad bought the property later in the year and took these pictures right after acquiring them. So
Fire that burned the cathedral?
no, different fire. It was a fire that burned 77 to 87 Pearl. It burned 6 Pine Street and affected the barn at 6 Pine Street as well. And this again was before we bought it. My dad spent at least 2 years renovating 77 to 87 Pearl Street and 6 Pine Street. The barn was stabilized at the time and locked up, and hadn't been touched since. The point of bringing that up is that it was economically rational to save the historical mixed-use buildings and the historical duplex on the property. So 7787 Pearl, mixed-use building built in the 1800s. Likewise, the duplex at 6 Pine Street, which is the browner roof there on the left in the satellite picture, also was severely burned and had to be gutted and redone in the late 70s, was also saved. The barn has never been economically rational to work on, not 40 years ago and definitely not in 2021. There are a finite amount of dollars that we have to work with, and it only makes sense to invest the dollars in places that will return and show a good benefit to anyone that is interested in renting the space. And those things have to converge. So 40 years ago, when the barn had fire damage and at that point more than a century of deterioration, the place wasn't worth investing in. By my estimation, since I've been doing this for more than 5 years now and interacting with that barn and stopping people from breaking into it for the past 5 years, it's definitely worse than it was. So the rationale for tearing it down has just increased in the intervening 40 years since we purchased the property. The rationale, if I might say as an aside, that's very similar to what you all are dealing with at Memorial Auditorium. Memorial Auditorium, if it were rational to invest in that building, the city would have done it. So they haven't, and it's being neglected and should be torn down just like this building. So the rationale, whether it's an enormous auditorium or a little barn, it doesn't matter how historical they are. If it doesn't make sense to invest in them, you shouldn't do it. And that's essentially what we're proposing, is to tear it down and give the city something useful, which is more permeable soil, green space. I'm not even asking to park there. I'm just asking to fence a little grass area. So the dog training facility, which is in the building on the northeast side of the lot, so that's 8587 Pearl. It's a dog training facility, and they're looking for some yard space so they can have dedicated outside area. If it were a different tenant, if it were a restaurant tenant, I would probably be asking for a patio area for dining, which would likewise could be permeable, and the barn still wouldn't be useful. It would still be an albatross on the property. So I know the DRB has broad discretion to overrule the DAB, and I'm asking you to exercise that because I don't think it's rational to keep the barn up. It may be a cute little barn, but it doesn't make it worth saving. So if you have any questions for me, you can fire away. And if you want to look at these pictures, you're welcome to. I've got the photo album here.
Can you pass them around?
Yeah, sure.
Those online, Jacob?
They are. They didn't upload that well, but I'll send you
Are
them.
they online? I didn't.
I just found them online and I'm trying to screen.
You can look at the real thing here.
You can't screen share, Mary, because I'm screen sharing. If you can give me the link, I can do it.
So I would just disagree with your characterization of what makes sense to tear buildings down or not, but that's, I won't attach it to this. I mean, that rationale about tearing down memorial property would apply to half of Europe that they've saved, so I won't quite.
Not talking about Europe.
You're allowed to say that,
Yeah.
and I don't have to agree with it, but I just wanted to mention that.
Right.
So if I understand correctly, if the decision is it's got to stay up, you're not going to invest in it.
No, it just doesn't make any sense to invest in it now. It would cost at least $100K to lift it, redo the sill plate, fix the spine, do the siding, do the slate. And that's before it has power or water or sewer. It's like, it could be cold storage if we did that $100K, and cold storage is not worth that much. So, not even in downtown Burlington is not worth that much. It's worth barely $1 a square foot, and that's like the upper limit of cold storage. That's what you get for office space in some parts of the city, you know, or I should say $12 a square foot if you're doing it annually.
I'd like to apologize for coming late. I'm sorry to miss the beginning of your presentation. When I was just coming in, you said that it was stabilized at some point?
Yeah, so there was a lot of glass that was broken window frames that were caving in after the fire, and they were framed out and boarded up. So stabilized as and secured so people couldn't break into it as easily.
I see.
Yeah.
And when was that?
1978. And since then I painted it red just because it was it was kind of an eyesore the way it was, and I have made sure that the doors and windows have stayed secured. I painted it 5 years ago, so that paint is not doing so well at this point, but I'm just trying to make it look halfway decent, even if it's not useful.
So if I understand correctly, you guys bought it in 78 and basically did no maintenance on it since 1978. Is that pretty much what you're saying?
More or less, yeah.
And
Though the surrounding buildings have gotten a lot of work
right.
done on them.
So one can assume that in 1978 it was probably in slightly better condition than it is today.
It was still smoking, but yeah, otherwise it was still like literally just on fire at that point. So it's since then there's no access to it, so people can't light fires in it. It's not as easy to break into as it used to be.
I mean, there is a jargon of, through neglect,
Just like Memorial or the Moran
I don't
plant.
think it's like Memorial. I like to stay on this one.
I don't know. It seems pretty similar to me because it's out of use and vulnerable to all kinds of mischief. The safer thing is to level them, but putting it off just leads to an overhang of liability, I think, at this point.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Oh, yes, no, sorry, I have several questions. So, 4 years ago, you applied for a permit to demolish it, but you withdrew?
I didn't go through the whole rigmarole of hiring an engineer and an architect to do an analysis. This time I did, and the engineer said it was at a state of progressive failure, which means that it's not condemnable at this point from his perspective, as far as like one snowstorm could knock it down. But I was hoping not to wait until that was happening. And then the architect basically outlined the different options and said, by his estimation, what you'd have to do to make it useful. And
So 4 years ago, you were thinking about it, but then realized you had to do the extra parts and
I just put it on ice until I had time. And to be honest with you, what compelled me to go through this round of application and legwork was the commercial tenant at 8587 Pearl, the Fetch the Leash dog trainers. They have constantly been, putting on gloves to pick up not dog poop, but human poop. And that's around that barn, so it kind of attracts that kind of mischief. And there's also been a lot of needles around there. We have since put up lights and cameras, which hasn't even really abated the issue. But it's like the sort of nature of that being kind of it's a giant, marquee for poor behavior. It's the same reason that the church put up a fence around their property. We don't have the space to do that in the same way, but when the Catholic Church was desanctified, they put up a huge chain link fence around there to keep people away from it. We don't have the space to do that. So to put a fence up there, I need to tear the building down to do it effectively. I guess they show up all right.
Were you made aware of this Thursday, October 7th letter from Ms. Ruth Henning?
No, I haven't. What is that about?
There's a woman, apparently this was made available to us by the city, that there's a woman in Weathersfield, Vermont, who is interested in bringing a carriage barn to her property, and she's interested in learning more. I know this is very recent, but I know.
So my discussion with historical preservationists. My discussions with historical preservationists, they basically outlined to me that the value of the barn is because it is where it is. It's not as historically valuable if it's moved somewhere else. I'm happy to give it away. I mean, like, if someone wants to come take it, they can come take it. I was going to make the slates and any of the old timbers available to resource, because obviously a lot of the bits of historical, especially old growth timbers, are really useful in other projects. If someone wants to take it all, and if they have the cash to burn to do that, I'm happy to let them do that. I just don't want it there anymore. So however that needs to happen. But from my perspective, moving it to a different property, from my understanding, it just wouldn't hold the same historical value. And I don't have unlimited funds to plow into things that don't return. So that's basically why I'm asking to have the approval to do this.
Have you done any outreach or it sounds like no, but just
Well, no, I have. I've done quite over the past 4 or 5 years. I've asked like a lot. I've asked people on the Historical Preservation Board for their opinions about it. I've gone through and tried to see what it would take to make it into a little tiny house, or like anything else, and it's a lot.
In terms of moving it wholesale, though, I just want to make sure because this just came to my attention.
The moving it, I got kind of shot down when I was talking about that really quickly, like I say, by the people that are expert on these matters, and so I stopped pursuing that line after they kind of shot me down. So it didn't seem like an option for people that valued the barn as such. So I didn't want to pursue that if it wasn't a valuable option,
The board members who are remote, any questions? AJ or Caitlin?
Go ahead, AJ.
No, you can go. I'm looking for my site reference.
I guess, I don't know if this is a question, but a point that I want to make. It sounds like with the ownership of the property being pretty long-standing, like, how are you arguing that this is not just demolition by neglect, which is pretty explicit in the ordinance, that you have a responsibility to not allow historic buildings to fall into disrepair and deterioration?
My assertion is that it was in disrepair when we bought it. It was burned out, and you can still see the blackened timbers. It's quite fire damaged from 1978. So that was before we bought it. We didn't do that to the property. There wasn't a fire in our tenure, and so there's the big thing is with me bringing these pictures from the year we bought it. The building essentially looks exactly the same. We haven't let the face fall off the building. I painted it myself when I thought it needed painting, and I haven't redone the slate, but the slate's also a remarkably durable material. The real damage happened the century before we bought it, and in the fire during the year of 1978. So we have not neglected this to the point of deterioration. That was there before. That's the point of me bringing these pictures along. We haven't not done anything specifically to plow money into it, but that's not to say we've neglected it. We haven't run plows into it. We haven't let cars destroy it. I've boarded, the windows were boarded up to make sure no one could break into it. There's not a colony of raccoons living in there tearing it apart. So, and I make sure of that, so it's not a, I'm not actively trying to see it collapse. That would be incredibly dangerous if it collapsed on its own. I'm not interested in seeing that happen. I would like to tear it down safely, and that's why I'm asking, in the interest of everyone that could walk by the building, it should be torn down safely and in a controlled manner, rather than, if it does go too long, it could collapse. But that's not my doing. That's because it was built in the 1880s, and it was around for a century before we bought it.
Yeah, and the repairs, you haven't really repaired the roof in the time that you've had it, right?
It hasn't needed it. I mean, the spine is
The
sagging.
report says there's some damage on the roof.
There are slip slates for sure, but there are slip slates on a lot of buildings. That doesn't mean the roof is in need of active, it just, to make it cold storage and watertight, there's a lot of money to make it that way. That doesn't mean.
No, I think
that
we
we've
got your
neglected it.
position quite clear on that kind of stuff. So I'm not pushing that. I just wanted to get clarity on what you've done. AJ, did you have questions?
Actually, Caitlin asked mine.
Okay, good. Then we have two people from the public who are here, Sharon and the name of the other person.
Yep. All right, so Sharon's on top. So Sharon, if you'll unmute, you can speak to us.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sharon Busher, and I'm a long-term resident in Burlington. And I listened carefully to Mr. Hinsdale. I knew his dad, but I listened carefully to him and his presentation, where he himself said that he compared his barn to Memorial and saying the city neglect and he neglected. In the end, he summed up that he hadn't neglected the building, but I think anybody who owns a structure who doesn't do anything but paint it is not really maintaining it. And so my concern is that neglect and the demolition of historic structures eliminates our linkage to the past. And it just continues. It just continues. And I find it unacceptable. I don't believe that we have historic preservation, we have all these standards and all these zoning regulations, but if indeed anybody can come in and say, it's fallen in such disrepair that there's no remedy but to demolish, neglect wins again. I find it unacceptable to suggest removal as the outcome. I believe that he himself said that it's not going to fall down. And I believe that I know ADUs need to be owner occupied, but with the housing crisis, and I understand the need from the applicant for revenue to be generated by anything that he owns, I would like to think that there might be some other solution for housing that would allow this structure to be preserved. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And the other person there, if you would introduce yourself and unmute.
So Matt, you can unmute and speak to us.
Thank you. Yes, I'm unmuted now. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Matthew Viennes. I'm a resident of Burlington, reside on St. Paul Street. And I want to concur with what Sharon said. I think she made some very salient points that I agree with. First off, I'm a bit astonished by the tone and general lack of respect that the applicant has shown for the concept of a historic property. As if I understand that somebody who owns property needs to be concerned about finances related to it, but he seems to have no sense of the value of a historic property in and of itself, which I think, unfortunately, maybe in today's society isn't considered enough. But that aside, I think, again, that Sharon brought up really important points about, his testimony in and of itself said that the property was being neglected. I note that this issue was addressed a number of years ago, and back in 2016, there was actually an article in 7 Days where Mr. Hinsdale himself said that the company was going to put $15,000 into shoring up the structure, and that it was actually would have cost less, maybe around $6,000, to simply raise it back then. It's not clear to me that any of that money was actually put into the structure. It looks like it was only painted, and other than that, no attempt has been made at all to preserve it. I think, again, it's clear that this applicant is simply letting the property fall apart with the hopes that that will resolve the situation for him. I think that that concept is contrary to Burlington's own laws. I think it's contrary to good community building where we seek to preserve our link to the past. I think this property is significant because it's unique, but also because of where it is, and it's one of the few remaining agricultural buildings from this part of town. I think the owner should see it as a treasure that he wants to preserve, rather than, as he said, an albatross. So I would really encourage this group not to allow it to be raised.
Can I respond here?
Let me just see, did you want to speak, Ron?
Sure.
He can speak from there, can he?
The microphone for 17.
Okay, so you need a microphone.
I just briefly.
You may want to move the microphone in front of you.
Thanks, Jacob.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Ron?
I'm Ron Wanamaker. I'm on the Design Advisory Board, and we saw this project. I'm also a member of Preservation Burlington. I'm also a citizen of Burlington, and I also saved an outbuilding. Got it in Vermont Magazine as a house. But anyway, just briefly, I think the applicant has said they've owned it since 1978, and it hasn't been touched since. I agree, the comparison to Memorial Auditorium, although the city does drop the ball and is exercising some demolition by neglect, that doesn't make it okay for everybody, and we do have ordinances against it. The applicant admits to no intention to invest in the building, no matter what happens. 5 years ago, the paint job is, Colonial Williamsburg says paint jobs last 5 to 7 years before they have to be done again, so not surprising, it doesn't look good. And then the definition of neglect is not hitting it with snowplows and not, physically abusing it or being destructive. It's just ignoring it until it eventually falls into disrepair so far that it can't be saved. Section 535, non-conforming structures. B, demolition. I just redlined, provided both the requirement to demolish a building that is not the result of demolition by neglect. And you fast forward to section 548, historic buildings and sites. We know where that's going to go. And in such cases, the building inspector will notify the property of violation, which I think has happened in the past. Has not? Has? Okay, I thought that had. I apologize. Such person shall have 60 days to remedy a violation event not correlated with 60 days of notification. So that doesn't pertain. But also, Section D, demolition of historic buildings, is to discourage the demolition of a historic building and allow full consideration of alternatives to demolition, including rehabilitation, adaptive reuse, resale, or relocation. Obviously, those aren't good. And then also to ensure the community is compensated for the permanent loss of a historic resource by a development of clear and substantial benefit to the community, region, or state. And I'd just like to focus on that, compensated for the permanent loss of a historic resource by redevelopment of a clear and substantial benefit to the community, region, or state. Tearing the barn down to make a green space for a dog walking business to have the dogs go outside and go to the bathroom is not, in my mind, a clear and substantial benefit to the community, region, or state. So it doesn't really rise to the level of replacement of the barn. That's really all I had to say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we've heard a few things.
Okay,
so if you
all
want-
right.
Yeah.
all of our buildings are historic. Every single one of them in Burlington
Well, it's
is
not.
historic. Hey, we know how to take care of historic buildings. We do it all the time. Every year I inspect them, all the ones that are occupied, and that's all of them except this one. We have dozens of them, buildings and outbuildings, that we actively plow money back into to keep them standing, keep them pretty, keep them safe. This is not occupied or occupiable, and it hasn't been since we owned it. And I'm incensed by the idea that we don't know how to take care of historic buildings. That's all I do for a living. That's all I do is take care of historic buildings and keep them up to code, because that's the mission of any good property owner, and the city inspects, and we have good records of compliance.
When you bought the building in 78, your father bought it. Was there any discussion of tearing it down then?
I was born in '92, and I have never heard about this building. I didn't hear about this building until I got into this job. I didn't know it existed until 2014. I wasn't aware of it, so I don't know. I am trying to make the best of a bad situation. Yes, in the best of all possible worlds, it would have been in continuous use as some kind of garage. I don't have that option. I never did. I brought you those pictures to show that, yes, the buildings that are next to it, all of which are older, except for the mid-century diner, which is now the dog training facility, we have taken impeccable care of those buildings. And in fact, the 77-87 building, we put, I don't know, $50,000 of steel into the building to shore it up and make sure it stays standing, because we have no intention of tearing down the occupied mixed-use buildings. The property is historical, and it is one of the last corners in that neighborhood that wasn't torn down in urban renewal. I get that this is trying to compensate for all the demolition that happened in the 60s, but this barn needs to be allowed to go, because we have done everything we can with the buildings next to it, and this one it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know like how else to say it. There's just no way to put money into it there wasn't in 2016 either. If it wasn't in Burlington, maybe, and there was a lot more leeway about what you could do with the building, and there was more elbow room around it, maybe, but not in the sort of straight-jacketed lot that it's in. It's right up against our property lines on two sides, so it's right in the corner. So I've got no room on the east and the south side of the building to really do anything with it. So it's not like I can cut more doors into it and make it more access for a resident, you know. It's like there's all kinds of reasons. I've thought about this for 5 years and trying to figure out what to do with it. And demolition is after 5 years of thinking about this a lot, is the only thing left.
You said that your father bought it in '78, and then you officially started owning it in.
No, I don't own the building. I'm the property manager. The company owns the building. But, so this is my job, is to take care of them. Did the company buy it in '78, or did an individual? I guess I'm wondering when the current owner came to own it, which sounds like the company. All right. So that was '78. I don't know the details of the LLCs and whatnot, so I don't have those memorized. But you know, it effectively has been in continuous ownership since '78. But yeah, it just, you know, so back to Memorial Auditorium, the roof of that building is not because anyone was neglecting the building, it's because it's an old roof, and at a certain point they become. Anyways, so being old.
I just have to tell you, don't go down that path. I find it more offensive than helpful to you. Okay? I was just suggesting
that. So old buildings, after a while, no matter what you do to them, they can be vulnerable. So that's why I'm saying is that this one is in that situation. It was when we bought it. So.
Does anybody ever request to use the barn, access it? And this is one of the concerns I have, just anecdotally. I know the proximity of that barn to the courthouse and the probation office. And during the day when I'm at the courthouse, I see kind of who's congregating near that barn. And you talked about needles and other things being found there. Is there any other group that's ever said, hey, we'd love to use the barn for the day, or we want pictures taken with the barn, or this would be a really good idea to feature this barn in any kind of advertising, or?
The thing that I came across before 2016 was a commercial enterprise that wanted to make a recording studio in there. I was like, awesome, you got to fit it up though. And they went in there and they were like, this doesn't make any sense to this. This is like, it's basically a rebuild. You'd have to completely rebuild it stick by stick to make it safe for a commercial space. And that was, at that point, I started thinking, I was like, oh, no one's ever going to think this is a good idea. So that's when I put in the application the first time. Actually, that was the impetus for that, was after a potential commercial tenant. And that was the only time that's ever happened. No one else has ever come to me and asked to do anything with it. And that was before I painted it. You know what I mean? So it looks better than it did back then. But anyways, yeah, I just wish that the logic of repair, or the illogical nature of repairing this barn would show up here. Because you can see in the picture from 1978, we did a ton of work and it was worth repairing those buildings. This one it's just not worth it. The other ones definitely were, and those are historical, and we have taken good care of them, the 3 other buildings on the property. So.
I don't want to retread too much ground here, but I think perhaps there was a question about when you came to own it, and you said you're the property manager, that the person who bought it in 78 is still the current owner. I think if they were here now, I think we would ask them, why didn't you put this application in 78, or what was your thought? Yeah.
My dad died in 2008, so I don't know. I can't ask him.
Let's try to keep it focused here on what's before us.
Yeah, I can't ask him.
I mean, it's just why they did or didn't do something 40 years ago is kind of irrelevant.
Okay. So I think maybe we've heard everything on this.
Yeah, I'm. Yeah.
I understand the dilemma that you feel you face, and we will probably deliberate at the end of tonight's meeting. So we'll close the public hearing at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks everybody else for participating. Okay.
It's my little alcohol screen. I appreciate it.
So we have, I don't know if this is like the mirror image here, this project, 230 Main Street.
Yeah.
Is the applicant here for that?
We have the appellate, or appellant plural, on Zoom. We have Ted Miles from city staff and me.
Okay, so is that Matt Daly and somebody else?
We have Jeff Nick and Ryan Nick.
Oh, okay.
Jeff and Ryan, you can both speak. Is there anyone else with you tonight?
No, just the 2 of us.
Okay.
Anybody else who wants to speak on this application? No? So Jeff, Ryan, and Ted, if you would raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury.
I do.
Okay. And
Scott might
so,
be speaking on it too.
We do.
okay. So typically, the city would go first and present their case, and then you folks would get to present yours, okay? Okay. So Ted?
Sorry, those of you with glasses know how difficult it is with the mask. Okay, thank you very much for this evening. My name is Ted Miles, Code Compliance Officer, City of Burlington. The property in question is 230 Main Street, which was the former Midtown Motel. In November 2020, they applied for a permit for demolition of the motel, and it was approved. As such, the conditions of the plan of the permit called for the demo of the building, the removal of the asphalt at the property, and it was going to be returned to green space with the exception of approximately 110 feet towards the front by the road was going to be some stone and some landscaping. So that permit was approved in November 2020. The demolition started shortly thereafter in December 2020, and the building was completely gone by the end of February of 2021. I believe you have some photos in your packet from an inspection that was done on March 2nd. It shows the building as being gone. The violation here that's alleged is that the property is not in compliance with the permit and that has not been returned to green space as it's a V, but is being used for parking, which is not permitted in this downtown area as pavement parking.
Any questions for the city on this? Okay, were you adding anything to there, Scott?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to hear what Jeff or Ryan have to say at this point. Whoever wants to go first to present why or how.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it simple for the time being, and we've looked at our permit, our approvals, and under number 2, the standard permit conditions, number 2, time limits. It clearly states that we have till November 24, 2023 to complete the project. And then after that, it says, or be subject to enforcement actions. So, where the advice of our attorney is, we have till November 24, 2023 to complete the project. So we're kind of miffed that we're being threatened by fines at this stage of the game.
Hey, sorry, go ahead, Jeff. I have a question.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead, AJ.
So help me understand something. But this part of the property is not approved for parking in the interim, right?
That's correct, but we have till 2023 to, we don't even know, at this, some of those people, we don't even know who's parking there.
So you don't know who that is. Are you letting other people park there?
Some of those people might be in the building we own next to it, but other people come and go and we're not sure who's there. We've had leases in place, but people aren't using it because of the pandemic. So, the other thing that, we could look at other things. I mean, I just want to focus on the fact that we have till November 24th, 2023 to complete the project.
And what will this be when completed? I don't recall, I don't see it.
Sure, no, that does concern us. Where you see that new gravel, that is going to become a landscaped area. So there'll be shrubbery in there. From that Subaru back, that's where the original 14 spaces were that were always surface parking. This is another little issue we have, is the definition of the parking, what type of parking it is. But that surface parking was always there. And our plans are to grass that in, leaving the driveway and a portion of that pavement intact, because that serves as access to the adjacent building, the duplex building that we also own. And that's how people access that building. But our fear is that if we were, especially with the closure of Sears Lane, and we already see evidence of homeless sleeping around the Memorial Auditorium and in an abandoned car in the library parking lot, that was as of 10 days ago, that this, in our mind, will easily become a homeless encampment if we grass that in. And we're very concerned about that potential. We've also talked to the police about this, and they're also concerned that if this becomes a landscaped area, it will become a homeless encampment. And that will not be a good outcome for anybody. It's better to leave it as parking, according to the police, rather than to risk having it become an encampment.
If that's your position.
I'm not sure. So, Jeff, just 2 follow-up questions on this one. As I look at this, there's 2 aspects of the violation issue. So the first is area has not been converted to green space, and then second is currently used for parking. If I'm correct, you're saying as to the conversion, you've got until 2024 to do that. And since it's not done, it can be used for parking. Am I understanding the two pieces correctly?
That we don't have to complete the project, and we wouldn't be subject to enforcement until after November 24th, 2023. It clearly states that in the permit.
Right, but not completing the project. I mean, like if you decided to host a music festival, that logic wouldn't apply, right? Or something.
Right, if we wanted to put a food truck there or you know, anything else, that's right. But the current uses remain.
Does the site plan as part of that approval include these surface parking spots as surface parking? Because I think that's where we're trying to understand. These were approved parking spots before the previous permit, and this use is continuing, or is this use as parking?
Yeah, Scott just put up the plan that shows where it would be grassed, the part where the access is for the adjacent building, and for the darker green would be the landscaped area with shrubs. The lighter green would be grass. We'd have a snow storage area, and then the driveway, we got to get, you know, the trash trucks back there to take the trash away. So that's basically what we're prepared to do by the November of 2023.
Well, what you're saying, though, is that you actually think there may be a better use for you to put it to and not do this. I mean, that's what the position you're presenting to us right now.
What's I'm sorry, I missed that question.
Well, the position you're presenting to us is that is not what you want to do because you think it's a magnet for homelessness or something like that. And so
well, I think while we have the date of 2023 available to us, we can have that discussion, and we're very nervous that will be the outcome of grassing this in as a homeless encampment. I think we can all agree that this town has a...
You decide... Typically, when people do construction, they start and finish. You took the building down, then you left it, which is sort of a decision in itself. So I'm wondering why you didn't just move ahead and complete the project at one time.
Well, we've had discussions. There was thought of the high school taking this entire site, and we said, okay, we came up with plans. We worked with our architect, and we showed how the high school could work there. And so that doesn't look like that's going to happen now. We've talked to the police, and they're concerned about a homeless encampment. So, we thought that that's something that we as a community should talk about rather than just grass it in and, invite that type of behavior to this site.
The current
I think that would be the unintended consequences that we're thinking will be the outcome here.
But the current permit you have...
Since we have till 2023, we thought we would wait that out and then maybe see, if there's another opportunity on this site to do something else.
But so it's almost beside the point, though, because the current permit you have is for this grassy space. And the theoreticals aside, are there any current approvals or permits in place for you to have parking on this site?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is there any current permitting in place that allows you to have parking on this site?
That was under the motel, right, Jeff?
Yes, well, I raised this with the DRB before, is that in 1986, the previous owner was granted approval for the gelato stand. Many of you remember the gelato stand in the very front of the motel. And in that approval, the zoning board of adjustments acknowledged that the parking spaces were leased during the day to a law firm, and they were used at night by the motel tenants. And that use, the leasing of those parking spaces, remained right through our ownership. And the city never came to us and say, well, you have to cease using that as parking. So our attorney, again, has advised us that, the state of Vermont, the Supreme Court has ruled in the state of Vermont that if that happens, the city doesn't say stop the use, that use is allowed to continue. Staff didn't see it that way and demanded that this be grassed in, which we reluctantly agreed to, but we've, and then now seeing what has happened at Sears Lane, that's a game changer for us, is that happened while this was all going on, and now we're saying, okay, if that could happen on Sears Lane, it could easily happen here. And why would we want to do that? I'm also the chair of the Church Street Marketplace Commission, and everybody is hugely concerned about all this behavior, so I certainly don't want to be the one contributing to this.
Brad?
Can you explain how you view, like, it's empty now, empty pavement versus empty grass, how one is more attractive than the other and how that's really relevant here?
Well, if it's used for parking, there's no room for encampments.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to take a break. I think Scott wanted to add something here. Scott, did you have something to add here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see if I can keep this short. That's one of my talents, keeping it short. So no part of the zoning permit includes surface parking. And the reason for that is, as I talked to Jeff and Ryan many times about the current zoning code, not the one in 1980, 1990, the current zoning code prohibits surface parking in this district. So the zoning permit was granted to convert the site basically to a green field, because Jeff was clear that he didn't want to build anything, because building anything had to comply with the form code. So the only route to demolish this building without building anything in its place was to make the site a green field. So to say that it's simply not done yet, it's a little like you get a permit to build a single-family home, you frame the building and run a convenience store for 1.5 years before you finish it as a single-family home before it expires in 2 years. So I think Jeff's argument doesn't pass the straight face test. Surface parking is prohibited. We can't allow it. We issued a notice of violation, and so here we are.
I guess.
Scott, is your interpretation then that the parking that was there, because it was under the cover of the parking structure, it was not surface parking?
That is correct.
When the structure was there? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. Surface parking and structured parking are separately defined. And I would also point out that the parking related to the hotel originally was permitted as accessory to that use. Right now, it's the only use. It is a primary use of the property now.
Jeff, are those spaces, that people who park there, are you leasing those spaces out at this time?
No, we're not, but people are using them from our building, and we have people that want to lease them again. But I will say that, when this property was built in 1958, there was no definition of surface versus structured parking. In 1986, when the city acknowledged that we had parking that was leased, and the city did not, and it acknowledged it in writing in this permit I'm looking at for the gelato stand, there was no difference between surface parking and parking under a motel. So the fact that Scott's chosen to use an interpretation of surface versus structured parking, to us, the surface parking has always been there. It's the same surface.
Yes, but the zoning code has changed.
What's that?
The zoning code has changed. So.
Right, but we should be subject to the old rules because nothing's changed on this property, and it says it right in the 1986 approval.
Once you tear down the building, you.
So my attorney has told us that we win on 2 accounts. One, it says right here, 2023, or be subject to enforcement actions. So we have till November of 2023. We also have approvals in that 1986 decision, and the city has never told us to cease, so that for 15 years, and the Supreme Court has ruled that we're allowed to keep the parking. Now, we did agree to grass it in, but looking at what could happen here gives us great pause. And, you know, it's surrounded by other surface parking that the city owns, so there's no, you know, it kind of fits what's there, so we're not changing the character of that neighborhood, that's for sure. So it seems a little, quite frankly, it seems ridiculous, especially when the city's short on parking, to demand that this becomes grass.
Unfortunately, that's your permit.
But we have till 2023 to make it grass, so we can do that.
Okay. So I think that's basically the summary, is basically, your view is that you're in the middle of construction, and you have until 2023 to finish construction. And that
That's right.
Parking, because this is what was there when the motel was there, and you're parking as if the motel is still there. That's more or less what you're saying.
Correct.
Any other questions for the applicant on this? I think we have a picture of how you feel about it, and I think we know what the city's looking at, so we will probably deliberate at the end of the meeting. I'll close the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So next, we have 43 Adams Court, one parking space waiver.
That's me.
Okay. And you are Jake Pill.
I am. Oh, I lost a pen.
Is anybody else here to speak on 43 Adams Court?
If you're on Zoom and want to speak to this, raise your hand. I don't think anyone does, but just in case.
I'm small fish.
Nobody on Zoom is looking to testify. Brad?
Okay. Good. So this is something the city has looked at it, and they're recommending support of you.
Yes.
How would you like to present this?
Yeah, I purchased this house about almost 2 years ago now. The previous owner had received zoning approval to turn it into a duplex, and had started that renovation and not finished it. And I'm looking to finish basically the renovation that she had started. Part of that includes rebuilding the back deck and stairway, because the current one is not at all up to code. And really the best way to do that eats up one of the existing parking spaces. So the upstairs apartment will be, it's just an open studio style apartment. Will have probably be leased only for one occupant, and I feel that it is reasonable to have only one parking space. It's also within, pretty easy distance of all the buses and other things. But I'm sort of going for a parking space per bed.
And if I'm correct, you're parking in the garage?
Yes,
plus
so
2 spaces.
that is correct. Yep.
Just curious. So how does the change in the parking ordinance affect this kind of property?
The requirement is still 2 spaces per unit.
Oh, it is.
I believe it was changed for ADUs.
So it doesn't affect this
Does not affect
for the
this.
duplex?
If it were a single-family home with an ADU, then it would just be a 2-space requirement, but it's a
Okay.
duplex.
Okay.
So it requires 4.
Just curious. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant here?
Do you foresee any other additional space anywhere there in the future, or no?
Any other additional spaces like parking or?
Parking there?
I do not. The driveway is very long, and if there were ever other vehicles, in the case of a snow ban or anything, they could easily be parked in the driveway. It's mostly just the accessible spaces. I can only fit 3 of them. But there's also plenty of street parking and all that stuff. It's mostly a technicality, I think.
We can drag this out more, but I think we're probably okay.
Amazing.
You don't have any other questions? Thank you, unless there's anything else you want. Oh, go ahead, Caitlin. Go ahead.
Just, are you living on the property, or both of these units are rentals?
I'm currently living there, and will probably continue living there for a while, but eventually I would like the option to have both of them be rentals. I did think about going the ADU route, but I figured since it was already zoned as a duplex, may as well keep down that path.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So we have 180 Flynn Avenue. This is a sketch plan review. I take it that's why you folks are here.
I have a question about this one, Brad.
Yeah.
When I looked at the staff report, it said not applicable for sketch plan. Did I get that wrong? Am I reading that wrong?
Oh, hang on a second.
Or was that just a reference to the last thing on the agenda?
Well,
That is the recommendation, I think.
not applicable.
A recommendation is not applicable for sketch plan.
Okay, okay. Thanks.
It's the recommendation, not the sketch plan that's...
Hey, I wanted to make sure I just, for some reason that struck me on this one and I was a little confused.
Okay, well, if this is a good image to have up there to start.
It is actually, I wanted to give you a little bit of a presentation so I could share my screen, and then we could maybe end on this.
Good.
So you want to do a screen share?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm
Make
I'm
sure
logged
you're
in. Audio's
muted
off.
and your microphone is off. Because if it's not, we're going to hear echoes, a lot of echoes. All right, so let me do a promotion to you, Jovial.
And maybe you could introduce whoever's presenting.
Sure, I'm Jovial King. I am born and raised Vermonter, and I'm a Burlington resident.
Kelly DeRoche, I'm with Beeman Lampier Architects. We've been working with Jovial on a couple conceptual plans.
So you can do a screen share now if you want.
Great, so I guess I could go a little bit of background or update. Is that a good idea? Okay. So when we put our application in for 180 Flynn, that was our plan, but we found out actually last week that that location is no longer a viable option for us. And Mary encouraged us to come in anyway because we're looking at a number of other sites and they're all in the same zone. And so we're really wanting to get clarity on our use because there's not a use that fits exactly the name of this project. So we wanted to kind of get your feedback and ideas so that we can kind of fast track the project when we find the correct location. So we have a number in play right now. So I just wanted to, if we lost you at Bathhouse, I wanted to give you a little bit of clarity.
You lost me at Silt.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to give you a quick little presentation on what a bathhouse is. So according to Wikipedia, a bathhouse really is a place that people gather to relax. They're a place of health and wellness. So in Russia, they're called banyas, and people, often sauna together. It's a very traditional thing. Or maybe you've heard of a hammam in a lot of Muslim countries, or an osen in Japan. So these are really, all over the world, different cultures have different forms of coming together at a bathhouse. So really it's about community, it's about health, and it's about wellness. So these facilities really address, bringing people together, bringing community together as a place for for health and wellness. So this is a big trend over the border in Canada. There's actually 14 Nordic bathhouses just north of us, and there's many already open in the country and a lot. It's a growing trend. So there's one in the Hudson Valley that's opening next year. A big one is just announced in San Francisco a few months ago. So you might be familiar with Boda Boda. A lot of people go up there in Montreal. That's a good example. Or Strum, they have 4 locations. Or Spa Scandinave, they also have 4 locations in Canada. So these are really community wellness spaces. So they often have different aspects to them, meeting spaces, cafes or restaurants, saunas, steam rooms. There's a great example of one that was built right on the waterfront here in Helsinki, Finland, and a beautiful, one of the biggest saunas in the world in Oslo, Norway. So Silk Bath House here in Burlington, what we're proposing is going to have saunas, steam rooms, cold plunges, hot pools, herbal baths, relaxation areas, and a cafe. And so I just loved this definition of health being a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. So there's a lot of great research on saunas and hydrotherapy. If you go to PubMed, you can find an immense amount of research and studies that have been done. So this facility, we're still in the visioning phase, but we wanted to come to you early to get your feedback on the use so that we could properly move forward.
So currently, we've been kind of putting ourselves in that category of the health club. I know Mary had a definition within her notes, and beyond what we all kind of would think of a health club is the why, kind of what would come to mind first and foremost, but also listed are items like laser tag, paintball, miniature golf, handball, where these would be kind of more maybe outdoor recreational, and where this project, not only are we going to see a lot of indoor activities, it seems like there's a lot of outdoor activities to support it. So that's kind of why we thought we kind of put ourselves in that health club category. And just looking at right now, a lot of the locations we're looking at are in this enterprise light manufacturing zone. And that right now is a conditional use. So we just want some clarity as we look at properties going forward.
An idea how big this is? How many square feet are you talking about?
So it's 15,000 square feet is the proposed facility right now, and that it's on an acre of land. So these facilities are real indoor-outdoor. That's sort of the Nordic part of it. You can run outside to the sauna, or you can relax in the outdoor garden. They're really kind of peaceful spaces that need a little bit of room. So from our research, we feel like this is a good size facility, but it could get a little bit bigger, could be a little bit smaller.
Do you have any sense of number of people a day that you might expect?
Yeah, so we're looking at 100-person occupancy. So, our max occupancy would be, 300 people a day. But, that would be, peak season.
Sorry, 100 people at any given time?
Yes.
But I see.
Yeah.
So people come and go. So if you came for the morning, you check in, you go into the locker rooms, you go into the saunas, steam rooms, you relax, you have a cup of tea, you leave. And then again and again and again.
And what sort of age ranges are you thinking about?
Yeah, so we're looking at probably about 15 and up, but we would like to have a family day, say Sunday from 7 to noon, so that people can come with their kids, so it really is a family place, but that most of the time it's really this kind of more serene or social environment, but not with a lot of little kids.
I've got a question as well. What sort of model are you going for here? Is this day use only, or would you have monthly membership, or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah, so it's a combination. We'll absolutely have membership. There's a lot of interest in membership from the Burlington community, and then we'll also have day use. So we're doing some good market research on that, but there'll absolutely be both offered.
Do you have any estimates of what you would expect the split to be between day use and membership? I'm just looking at the note in the staff report that, Membership clubs are not a permitted conditional use, but health clubs are, so just trying to get information there.
I don't feel like I can give a really educated guess at this point, so I think it's TBD. But we do have a community survey on our website that we're, really trying to get feedback from people. How often would you come, so that we can get a better sense and really, meet people's needs.
But I think to add in our conversations, Jovial has said that she doesn't want to she wants to make sure that the memberships aren't kind of crowding out this place, not allowing it to have that continuous day use. So I think the day use seems to be more of your priority.
And then can you share more about the kitchen use in here? What's the square footage and what sort of food or service would be in use there?
So I think it would be, I don't know what the square footage is.
It would be classified as a cafe because in this zone, a restaurant wouldn't be allowed, so that'd be under 2,000 square feet.
So I think it would be, light food, sort of, to meet people's needs, like soup, salads, cheese plates, something that would complement the space, but it's not going to be a big dining destination. Is not our goal at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So sketch plan, I'll say, it's sort of a question, Scott, to some degree for you also, but before I get to that, I would want to stress that I think the difference between what's planned for the nighttime and what's planned for the daytime really needs to be set forth pretty clearly. And I think about some of the projects that have come up in this general area and, outdoor events, music on that patio, how that migrates around. I'll really want to know if we get to the point of this being a full application. I know right there that there's some very close residential properties and that the sound very much carries from existing events at the brewery nearby. And so I think that will have to be very, very clear. Are there going to be night events? Are there going to be nighttime pool parties? Those sorts of things will have to be very much ironed out.
No pool parties, but yeah, it's a good amount of the facility is actually at kind of a shush level, like a quiet level, if not silent. So we're definitely going for that more than we are going for a pool party, because a lot of people are going there to really just relax and unwind, and it would not serve our clients very well if there was a really noisy situation.
I appreciate that now, and I appreciate that's what you're saying now, but we also have to look at this permit running with the land. So that may be something we have to talk about. So, and I know the facilities well. I've been in many types of these facilities. That's great. I like the idea. I think it's something that would do generally well in the city. I do have some concerns about how the use fits in with the ELM district. And this is a question for Scott. Scott, or Mary, sorry, I just see your face, or Matt's face. I guess Mary's there too if I scroll my Zoom around. Why is this not a recreational facility, an indoor recreational facility? Am I missing something?
We looked carefully at the definitions in Article 13 for the types of use, and there really is not a close fit for the type of use that Jovial has presented. And I've also cautioned Jovial and her design team that the ELM is under imminent change. I know that the City Planning Office is going to the Planning Commission to begin discussions about further refining uses in the ELM, and the ELM in general, perhaps even segregating it into 3 separate areas. Those are preliminary conversations. So the Office of City Planning recognizes the ELM needs more attention. Right now, it is silent relative to uses like this that are proposed. So your sketch plan review is now under the regulations in effect, but we anticipate those to be further refined perhaps in the near future.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's an interesting use in line with how we've defined things. So I would encourage the applicant, if they wanted to pursue that, to really refine the project to more clearly fit into a use so that we don't have to get into that very difficult discussion.
So refine it in terms of offering, like, paintball with your spa experience.
No, I mean, I don't want to give that direction, but I think I would real closely look at what's included either in a recreational indoor facility or look at more closely what's included in a health club and try to incorporate some of those elements so that we're not faced with, assuming the regulations don't change dramatically, not faced with really having to weigh exactly how to determine this application in the context of unclear regulations. That's not something that
Yeah, I mean, we did.
goes well for anybody.
Yeah,
shortly.
totally. I mean,
Short answer.
we definitely did do that. I mean, we looked at where we could fit and what makes sense, and we know the why is a health club. And we know, I mean, the primary source of revenue for this facility is the use of the facility, right? So it's not other like services or other things. You come in, you check in, you go to the lobby, you go to the changing room, and then you go use the facilities just like you would at, say, the Y. And there's a yoga and fitness room. So I don't know. It's not that there was another category where it was like saunas and steam rooms and those kind of facilities, and we just didn't want to be in one. We really feel like this is a great use, and we just need to sort of expand. I mean, when you say health club, and then it's very focused on the physical. It's like you work out your muscles, you this, you that, you're running or you're playing tennis, but it's like, what about mental health? What about emotional health? What about social health, right? So I just feel like the health club, people are coming there to, they're all interested in wellness. So that is like very similar to the Y, but we happen to have other facilities. And traditionally the Y did have a sauna, and there's oftentimes steam rooms in those kinds of facilities. So I hear you, and I really appreciate that feedback. But I also want to say we kind of did that, and we feel like this is where we're at, and I don't know how much more we would expand and really just fit the vision of what we want this facility to be.
So the other difference with the recreational facility indoor, it's 20,000 square feet and over versus the health club, which is the 5,000 to 20,000 square feet. So that's why we kind of put ourselves into that category. And
I would note that really the whole sketch plan thing is for you to get a sense of what the issues might be. And though I respect AJ a lot, I'm not sure that I would agree with suggesting that you change what you're trying to do to fit some zoning definition, but understand what, and I think maybe this is maybe what AJ is getting at, is that what the goals and limitations and sort of attitude of that zone is, and try to, not push up against the limit too much.
That's exactly right, Brett. You're more articulate at that than I am.
Well, one thing I was going to say, though, is that if the zoning, if I'm right about this, Mary, if the zoning is being rewritten, there's a warning period and a permit. And at that time, they have a choice, I think, isn't it true? As to when they apply, if the new one is not adopted but it's being considered, they can apply under either.
No, once it's warned, it's in effect.
Once it's warned, in effect? So once it's warned, they can't apply under the existing zoning regulations?
And when do you think it will be warned?
Well, it hasn't evolved to that point. Another option I might suggest is participate in those conversations as it's being further refined and there is more fine-grained definition for not just uses but locations. I know your timeline is quicker, so that's why you are before the DRB tonight to do the temperature test here to see how they feel your application might fare under the current regulations. If you feel like now you haven't clearly defined exactly the spot you want to be, and this is an imminent conversation, it may be well worth your while to participate in those hearings before they get to the refinement and a warning for zoning changes, so that you will be not only fully informed, but fully vested in how those policy changes occur.
One of the things I see here is these are, I think when we call them low-key activities, they're not, they're not going to be the conscience not having that, I was just saying those kind of things. And I think those are the things that seem consistent with the attitude of not having restaurants, not having certain things in the zone, and trying to keep the zone, despite what happens on, when they have the big arts festival every year. I mean, that changes the art hop. When that happens, it does change the character of everything, but that's a momentary kind of thing. So it looks like what you're presenting is consistent with how that's seen, but it is entirely possible that they could come up with something that would, because of the scale of it, you could be pushing up against it. And so I think what Mary's basically saying is the sooner you can get it in. I would suspect that having a piece of land is really challenging.
It is, but we actually have a few really great options. So we're working really hard. Once we realized that the 180 Flynn wasn't a viable option, we've been working hard to find some spaces, and so that's why we felt like it was worthwhile to come here. So we are ready to move forward, and that's why we really wanted to get your temperature so that we can put our application in and feel confident that if we're going to go through all the, working with engineers and the expense, that we will be on the right path. So that's really my goal leaving tonight, is feeling like, okay, we're going to really shoot for this use and feel confident in that, and not get 6 months in and then and then have a problem.
So you've got a pod of serenity inside of all the chaos that's happening.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
And that sounds good. I think, how parking works into it, how lighting, I think it was mentioned as to what happens to neighbors, and, just night lighting is sort of an issue that, so how is it seen from other places? Those are.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm making notes. I mean, it's definitely going to be low lighting. Yeah. Like, if we had music, it'd be like a cello, playing, not like a rock band kind of thing. So I think that we should have that serenity, feeling. And in the summer, sure, there could be, in the social area, if there's people chatting in the tea gardens, or if we have, we'll have wine. That could get noisy, but really no noisier than any of the breweries or bars or other facilities in this zone.
And when we've really started to look at the site, we are trying to, and this was prior to us knowing that the site would possibly be changing, but kind of placing the more quiet areas towards the residential side, and then more activity kind of towards where the active side of the site is.
Towards the parking, yeah.
100 people is a lot of people.
Yeah, that's our max occupancy, so.
You've got staff, right? How many?
So there'll be 20 full-time, over 20 full-time employees. They'll be all good paying jobs. So I really do feel like it's a tremendous community asset for Burlington. It will be really excellent for the community and then for any visitors that are coming. So we really do want to have it be in Burlington and not have to kind of move outside of town to meet our needs, because we feel like the demand and the interest is really here for this kind of facility.
Well, and I think too, that's all about the experience, and you're not going to have 100 people all outside at one time. There's a lot of the indoor experience. You'll have people kind of moving through the space, and part of enjoying it of a facility like this is less people kind of in your space, and kind of keeping people spread out.
Yeah, if you do the math on an acre of land, 15,000 square feet, and then 100 people, it would still feel really like hello over there, not like excuse me, is really the goal.
You said that there was alcohol? Or
yeah, we would like to be. A lot of these places traditionally, it's not really bar forward, but it's like, oh, have a glass of wine afterwards with like my cheese plate or whatnot.
So I guess in some of our goal here too, just with trying to figure out where we fall in a category and use is, a lot of what the examples Jovial showed will say spa in there or something. So there's also the spa salon category. But when you look at that in the zoning, it's really mixed-use residential areas where, we feel like this would impinge more on a neighborhood. And it's not necessarily just about beauty, and, this is more about like kind of that mental wellness and health.
Yeah, we don't, in the spa category, it's tanning salons, nails and hair, and we don't do any of that. So it's really, the business model is not personal services. We, will offer a massage, but that's not a primary use of that's not our main focus in terms of the business model. It's really use of the facility.
I would say that one of my concerns that I would be looking at, I know we have discussed parking, but if it's in a light manufacturing area, trucks and turnaround areas and appropriate parking and pavement for everybody else in there, and then if, so I think that would be something that I would be asking about.
Say it again, how it impacts the other parking and trucks for other neighbors?
This particular site, it looks like there's one.
Well, that site, this site's not in play anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
But for any other site, I would imagine many light manufacturing sites have some sort of shared or pavement situation, so that's something that I would be.
You're saying sort of being mindful from imposing like on their use to move around and have big trucks.
Right.
Okay, great.
And I think going through exploring this site was a good kind of test of that, because there is, Citizen Cider has loading docks right next door, and we were looking at it campus-wide, and we know we need 30 for the ordinance. We need 30 parking spaces, but we think the facility could probably use more than that just based on our research. So those are definitely items we've been looking at.
I'm just sort of curious. So basically, you've got it with a single entrance. Is that structurally sort of how the program works, that have everybody come through that? I got it as a lobby there, but
Yeah.
one entry point.
Yeah, so to kind of, I don't want to take too much of your time, but to walk you through, I mean, you would really, you'd walk into the facility, you would check in at the lobby, there'd be a small little retail area there. You'd get, your robe and your slippers, you'd go into the locker rooms, you'd check into, your locker, put your stuff away, then you'd walk into the big shower room. There'll also be private showers available, but a lot of these facilities have, just a bank of showers to do a quick rinse. And then you can, walk in and use the pool, the sauna, the steam room, or you can go. Pointer. Oh, great. You can go. Let's see. Oh, you have to hold it. There you go. So yeah, you walk into the retail, you come, or the lobby, check in. These are all locker rooms in here. And then this is the big bank of showers, and then there's also individual showers. And then you'd come into here, you'd spend time in the pool or in this hot pool. There'll be heated benches. There's a large community sauna here. There's actually a napping room. Most of these facilities have napping rooms where if you're after, soaking or sauning, you can just relax. Or you can go down here. So this is all quiet, right? So this is like, you're at a whisper level. And then you can come out here, and this is the outdoor space. There's hammocks back here. Down here, there's 2 saunas, a hotter sauna and a regular temperature sauna. There's a cold plunge over here. There's cold showers. So you can kind of go back into this space. So that's another kind of entry and exit point. And this is, again, all going to be quiet relaxation area. And then in here, we're going to have a large greenhouse is the main feature of this facility. So a lot of tropical plants and medicinal plants. There's a little bit of, there's the kitchen and the bar, so you could walk and get a cup of tea or a glass of wine, and there's a lounging space. So this will be at a talking level. So it basically indoor voices kind of space. And then you can go out here again, and this is more going to be a social area. So this is if you wanted to get tea, wine, and you can kind of sit and have food. And then there'll be gardens all out here. So it's a bit split in terms of this is quiet zone on this half, and this is more of a social space. And then you would exit back through kind of the same way, but most likely there'll be an exit door, so you're not, if there was a line, you wouldn't have to go through the same space, but you could go out and around.
This has nothing to do with our purview. I already say that it seems like a lot of small spaces banging into each other, and some larger presence would be helpful in there somewhere.
You mean more open space and room?
Yeah. Everybody's wandering through these small
Corridors.
spaces and things like that, and it just seems, but that's not our purview at all.
Well, no, it's great feedback as a citizen, but I think that the hallways would certainly be big enough that it wouldn't be tight. That would be architectural bad design. And the greenhouse space is a really large, big open space.
Yeah,
So I think it's hard to tell in this picture, but it's quite a big building. But noted for sure.
So our job at this point is try to give you feedback. I don't know if we've given you some sense of it. I think, as AJ says, I think what I'm thinking is that we probably are really willing. It seems like a very good idea. It seemed like a good use in where you're trying to put it. And we would try to work with you to try to see how it fits within that zone. But I think that's something to not ignore, but to pay attention to and give us some support in how we can look at it that way. That's tonight.
So what, can you just clarify on
Well, I
support?
think,
Make it as easy as possible to
For us,
to
sure.
say yes.
Sure,
I feel like I did, but I'm not sure what else to add.
Well, no,
or
I think, but it helps because it's not a specific location. Once
Got
you get a
it.
specific location,
Yeah,
then we
yeah,
can
yeah.
look at those kind of things. What happens with the neighborhood, what happens,
Yes.
how's parking, how do people enter and exit, how's the lighting work? All those kinds of things in context of, and definitely, we've had some things recently, on Pine Street that do push the limit sometimes, so it's, you're not alone in that, but this seems like a great use for that area.
Yeah.
Changes.
If I may, Jovial, the question here is quite to point. Could the DRB review this as a health club in ELO?
It seems,
Thank you, Mary.
Under the current regulations?
it seems that we can at this point, right?
To AJ's concern, I just double checked the definitions, and the definition for health club versus recreation facility indoor are nearly identical, other than the size of the facility. So I feel like that addresses your concern, AJ.
It does, provided that you apply the right way, to some degree.
As in,
And one is approved and one is not.
right?
One's allowed via conditional use review and one is not.
Right,
Hence my point.
We want the one that's allowed. That's what we're going for.
Sorry, Mary, conditional means it's allowed?
By the DRB.
Okay, got it.
Discretionary review.
And seeing that it fits within the conditional use definition, that's right. But like I said, and I think maybe this is why that zone is being looked at. It's going through so many things, it's got so many different aspects to it. It's sort of something different to everybody who's on that street at this point. And yet it's a valuable resource for the city. It's a unique zone.
Yeah.
And I think maintaining that unique character is really critical, I think, for the city. But I think what you're proposing is, to me, seems to come into that area.
And even if it is a different location, a different zone, I guess, we're just trying to wrap our heads.
Well, the zone's going to impact, I mean, that's.
I guess we need to see it.
Yeah, that's.
But we also, we're trying to figure out where do we fall kind of within a category of use.
Well, the health club seems to work, and in the ELM zone seems to work, but if you're in some other zone, you're going to have different.
Right.
And a caution I would offer about choosing a site in ELM is this is enterprise light manufacturing. If you're looking for serenity, you might have trouble next to a manufacturing facility, particularly for outdoor activities.
Yes, absolutely. And we looked at some, and it was like, trucks backing up, and it was really loud, constant noise, and we were like, that's not going to work. But at the same time, you're in an urban area, so it's just you're going to have some of that, and we think we can manage it, especially with, we'll have, moving water outside, so that will kind of be a background noise that should be really peaceful and be able to kind of separate some of the.
Got the train track there. We're
Yeah.
hoping for more trains.
Yes, totally. Yay for more trains. We'd love a train stop right at the facility, but but I think that that's okay. We are choosing really to do this in Burlington, and that's what it is, versus, going outside of town. We really made that conscious choice because we feel like it's a really great fit for the community. Great.
And some of the examples, like Boda Boda, are right in
Yeah.
Montreal and outdoors, and so.
Yes, I've been to several of these facilities before, and I think I know how you would do it, but I would also encourage you just to think about how you make sure it doesn't become a hookup spot, which has happened, I'm sure, and again, I know different ways of making sure that doesn't happen, but.
Great, well, we'd love your feedback, and that's certainly not our intention, and
I know
I
it.
think it will be a very clean facility, which means that there'll be, staff walking around, in a very continual way, so it's not going to be kind of a, hey, have fun, we'll see you on the other side
Right.
kind of thing. There'll definitely be a lot of staff, constantly, keeping the place safe and quiet and all those things. But thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, I think we look forward to more details.
Yeah. Great, so in terms of my notes, that you do feel good about the health club categorization of use, but it seems like, lights really pay attention to, be mindful of prioritizing other manufacturing, businesses around, because that's the priority for this zone. And noise, being aware of noise, and the kind of bar atmosphere or pool party atmosphere, if we end up in a neighborhood, that could be an issue. So I think those were all my main takeaways.
And as AJ says, I think the permit goes with the land, so we've, you've got a very poetic way of saying this, but somebody else may say, gee, this is a great opportunity to turn this into, and our permit needs to provide enough definition so that it can stay what you're presenting it as.
And I do just want to note that, we did have an acre of land, for this space, and that's why we designed it in this manner. But the lap pool, for example, might not fit in the other facilities. So I don't want something like that to be, we come back and we say we couldn't fit the lap pool, and then it's a make or break with the health club category.
This is sketch plan.
Great, okay. Good, so just throwing that out there, that we're going to have to work with whatever space we get.
Sounds exciting. We look forward to seeing more.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, really appreciate it.
We weren't going, we'll close this item, but we weren't going to go through those new zoning regulations.
Not tonight, the calendar's on the next meeting, I think.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was on the.
Two things briefly, though.
Yeah.
We have Celeste Crowley sitting there in the corner helping out with minutes. Thank you, Celeste.
Thank you.
Hi, Celeste.
While we work on filling the tech position. And something totally unrelated to that. City just recently prevailed at the Vermont Supreme Court as to the 60-day discontinuance we have for unenforceable violations a la the 15-year statute. So we have the provision for unenforceable violations. If you get it, that's fine, but if you discontinue for more than 60 days, you're SOL. And so that's been upheld by the Vermont Supreme Court.
Okay.
So that's it.
Okay.
That's all we got.
Well, then we're closing the hearing, the public meeting here. And we'll deliberate if everybody's okay with that.
Recording stopped.
So we have 7780.